Good afternoon. It's lovely to see your faces. In one of his speeches, one of my favorite authors, Wayne Dyer, once said, "The truth is not that we believe something when we see it, but that we'll see it when we believe it." I thought about this recently when I was visiting my 98-year-old mother and thumbing through an old magazine. On the last page was a story by Rick Bragg about a sick, mange-eaten dog his mother and brother found on their farm one cold, rainy day. The dog was in such bad shape, hips displaced, teeth worn down, eyes clouded, that they didn't even want to bring him to the veterinarian because they knew that the only thing the vet would say was that she needed to be put down. When the writer's brother Mark looked at the heap of dilapidated dog flesh, he immediately gave her a name, Pretty Girl. As you might surmise, a month later, the writer pulled into his mother's driveway and saw a beautiful white German shepherd standing guard. The once near-dead animal had transformed into her name. She became Pretty Girl, in large part because that is what her rescuers believed her to be. True, there was a lot of hard work and special care put into the transformation, but had not Mark seen her potential with a different set of eyes, then no one would have bothered with the work or the care. The story touched my heart because it brought to mind one of my most beloved mentors, Dr. Asa Hilliard III. The world lost Asa's physical presence on August 12, 2007, while he was leading one of his many educational tours to Ghana. But his memory and his phenomenal body of work in history, psychology, African studies, and education will continue to inspire scholars who seek to do what is right in the world. And I am hoping that invoking his name, his memory, on this auspicious occasion will inspire each of you as well. One of Asa's primary lessons was that we must leave no stone unturned, no battle unfought, to allow the brilliance of our children, especially children of color, to bring light to the world. He knew the forces aligned against our young, those who would name them as not smart enough, strong enough, good enough, those who would say they did not speak right, those who would cause them to question their own worth and thus stunt their growth, those who would suggest that they were anything but phenomenal. I have learned from my brother Asa to work to ensure that the world see our children in a different light, and even more importantly, to ensure that they see themselves as the amazing gifts that they are. But first, let me give you a little glimpse into the wonderful spirit of Asa Hilliard, or Nana Bafor, the name he received in Ghana. Asa was famous for his bear hugs. When he hadn't seen you for a while, he would grab you and hold you tight and say to the world, "This is going to take a while." When my daughter was 5, he gave her a $20 bill when he first met her and told her how smart she was. That was it. For her, he was immediately Uncle Asa. Whatever he gave her to learn, she learned. When she was 10, he gave her a handbook of Meruneter, which is what we refer to as hieroglyphics, and she probably became the only 10-year-old hieroglyphic scholar. In her 20s, she's still continuing to learn from that book. In Asa's presence, she felt valued. He also taught us to value our children in different ways. Whenever a baby was near, he would help the parents and the observers see the child in a new light. He'd always say, "Look how alert he is. Look at his eyes. He's looking at everything. He knows so much already." Our children of African descent typically don't feel valued in this society. I found out recently that in Cuba, when a child is born, be it from a teenage mother, a black teenage poor mother. Every mother gets a letter from the government saying thank you for providing us with a new citizen. Imagine the comparison of what our teenage black poor mothers get when they give birth. Here, many of our children, because of various attitudes, have internalized toxic views about themselves and their families. I recently completed a book called Multiplication is for White People, and the name of the book comes from a child saying to her tutor, "So, Miss L, why are you trying to teach us multiplication? Black people just add and subtract. White people multiply." Another child said to his teacher, "So, Miss Summers, they made us the slaves because we're dumb, right?" We have to not only value our children, but we have to convince them to value themselves above the noises and the verbiage of a larger society that they have somehow internalized. Even when no one said this to either of those children, no one ever formed those words. Somehow they have internalized this notion, and you have to fight against it. Asa also taught about the traditional African cosmology. And in the African cosmology, we recognize our children as divine spirits. These spirits have been entrusted to us in order to teach us how to assist them to manifest their divinity. Our role as their educators is to help them uncover and develop their divine qualities. When we realize the sacred mission of valuing each of our charges, of assisting them in reaching for perfection, then we can begin to teach them. For only then do we realize just exactly who we're working with. Asa further informed us that the aim of traditional education for the mind is not separated from the body or the spirit. The body was seen as a divine temple, housing a mind and a spirit. In the African tradition, it is the role of the teacher to appeal to the intellect, the humanity, and the spirituality of his or her students. In order to make such an appeal, however, a teacher must be convinced of the inherent intellectual capability, humanity, physical capacity, and spiritual character of students. The goal of such education is to help students reach toward their own perfection in body, mind, and spirit. When a child is born into Western society, what do we say? What did she have? How much did it weigh? How they're doing? I spent time in Alaska, and Native Alaskan Athabascan communities, when a baby is born, the question is instead, who came? Pierre Ernie tells us in Childhood and Cosmos that the search in most African societies is to determine who and not what the child is, indicating that the child is a unique entity. On the other hand, this very special divine gift, this child, is also seen in Africa to be a part of a collective, a family, a community. For Africans, the self is incomplete without being incorporated into the larger family. Thus, African traditional education prepared students to work with and be an integral part of a social group. Does that sound a little bit like John Dewey to you graduates? The African saying is, I am because we are, which expresses the connection, the sense of connection to and responsibility for the group. The spirits of children are revered. Rather than honoring the uniqueness of each child's spirit, our nation's educational enterprise continues to be obsessed with the notion of determining children's intellectual capacity. In a graduate seminar, Asa once reminded students that for millions of years, animals and humans have been teaching their young what they need to know to survive. Not one mother has tried to find out if her bear babies or her cat babies or her human babies had the capacity to learn. They just taught them what they needed to know. Over and over, we now try to find out what is wrong with the children or their families that stunts their learning, without looking carefully with sufficient attention to what does or doesn't happen in classrooms. Asa cites an interview with Professor Ime, a traditional healer and university professor from Nigeria, who spoke of the quest in African education to eliminate foolishness. It is foolishness that keeps a person from learning, not the Western notion of mental capacity. Africans assume that all people have the mental capacity to achieve, but they are concerned about the software that allows brilliant people to misuse that capacity. It is only foolishness on the part of the student or perhaps the teacher that prevents learning. One of my favorite stories about educators believing in the potential of a student everyone else has forsaken comes from well-known motivational speaker Les Brown. After being abandoned as an infant by his young single mother, who gave birth on a filthy floor in an abandoned warehouse in Liberty City, Miami, Brown and his twin brother were adopted by a single cafeteria worker. Because of his high energy and inability to focus, he was placed in an educable, mentally retarded class in 5th grade. He says that because he was called slow, he lived up to the label. He languished in these classes until a chance encounter in his junior year in high school changed his life. As he was waiting outside a classroom for a friend, the substitute teacher inside the class called out to him, "Young man, go to the board and solve this problem." "Well, I can't do that, sir." "Why?" "I'm not one of your students, first of all." "Go to the board and work it anyhow." Well, I can't do that, sir." "Look at me. Why not?" "Sir, because I'm educable, mentally retarded. I'm not supposed to be in here." Brown said as the students in the class erupted in laughter, the teacher, Mr. Leroy Washington, said, "Don't you ever say that again. Someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality." The comment was a turning point of Brown's life. Mr. Washington became his mentor. Brown followed Washington around, watched him, modeled his behavior, and wanted to be a great speaker like him. Brown believes that it was because of Mr. Washington's comment and his continued insistence that Brown would be what he believed he could be, that Les became the remarkable success that he is today. Brown spoke about Mr. Washington in an interview. In his presence, he made you feel, without uttering a word, that you had greatness within you. The man triggered something in me that reminds me of what Goethe said. Look at a man the way that he is, and he only becomes worse. But look at him as if he were what he could be, then he becomes what he should be. I've personally experienced many miracles of teachers who rename the present to transform the future. Another example in my personal life is one I wanted to share with you. Mr. Orlando Moss, a music teacher in Atlanta who has been consistently able to mold young people with little or no musical background into a prize-winning orchestra, the William Still Sinfonia Orchestra. He demands hours of concentrated practice, much beyond the endurance and attention span of most adults. He tells the children, "I know you are tired, but I know you can play that measure with better tone. We will stay here all night if we need to." And the youngsters willingly put in the effort. even after their parents, or even while their parents are grumbling and falling asleep in the bleachers during practice. Of course, Mr. Moss will come in early or stay late to help a young person who needs special attention. I first met Mr. Moss when I brought my 8-year-old daughter to his orchestra class. He quickly said, and rather perfunctorily said hello to me, but directed his intense attention to Maya. As he shook her hand, he looked deeply into her eyes and said, "Hello, prodigy." And that is how he greeted all of his students. All mostly Black and Hispanic, most from low-income families. And that is what they became, prodigies who perform for heads of state around the world. As you leave Erikson Institute today and go into the world to become an integral part of the lives of multitudes of children, I wish for you the ability to rename the present, to transform their futures. I wish for you the vision to see the divinity in each child and, by the way, each parent, and the ability to help them move toward their own perfection. You have the ability to change the world because you are the caretakers of those who will inherit the earth. See them in the best possible future that you can possibly believe for them. I was researching teachers' perceptions at one point, and I went to the preschool class. The teacher was an elderly African-American woman, and I asked her, "What guides you in your work with these young children?" She pointed to a 3-year-old little Black boy who was running around the play yard yelling loudly, and she said, "You see that little boy?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." He said, "He's going to grow up either to steal my purse or to be my doctor. And my job is to make him my doctor." Let me close with some words from Asa that guide me as I work with children on a daily basis. When one feels valued, the heart is opened. And when the heart opens, the mind is sure to follow. Thank you very much.